Last Vigil by Michael Moorcock. Originally published as Last Vigil in the August 1970 issue of Visions of Tomorrow magazine. In all subsequent reprints, it was retitled to Waiting for the End of Time, starting with a French anthology in 1973 and followed by 3 collections of the author's stories: Moorcock's Book of Martyrs in 1976, Dying for Tomorrow in 1978, and Earl, Aubec and Other Stories in 1993. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. Last Vigil, or Waiting for the End of the World. Chill winds blew over Tanat Turtak, and the salt stink of the sea was in Suran's nostrils through all the night and all the day, because the waters were rising as the moon sank down. Chill winds shredded the clouds above Tanat, and sometimes they brought snow, and sometimes they brought hot rain, and sometimes they merely made waves on the sea. His long hair floating in the wind, Suran Rael Juriek stared up at the moon and beyond it to Cadel Star, which had once been so far away from Tanat, last world on the rim. There were many large stars in the sky now, and soon they and their planets would be one huge body. Tanat, too, would soon be part of that body. From where he stood on the city's tallest tower, Suran could see the distant mountains, and now he altered his vision to bring one particular area into sharper perspective. He was sure he had seen something moving there again, but the wind was stirring the snow on the slopes. Perhaps that had been all he had seen. Suran looked behind him at the slender towers of the city, which was called Rayon Vame, Inevitable Hope, a city which was also a machine. Suran had built Rayon Vame, and he had named the city machine, which had been designed to make Tanat a world completely independent of its sun, to shift it away from the pull of the mass before it became too strong, to cross intergalactic space and find a galaxy still in equilibrium. That was why they had chosen this stark rim world for their experiment, because it was the last habitable world on the edge of the galaxy. And the galaxy was doomed to undergo a monstrous change in which nothing would remain as it had been. The galaxy was condensing. They had known it would, since their scientists had come to understand the nature of the huge dark bodies which lay at the center of the galaxy. Mega-quasars with mass so great that even photons could not escape them. They had begun to increase their mass with every body which entered their gravitational field. And now the entire galaxy lay within that field, and each sun and its satellites were inexorably being drawn in as the mega-quasars consolidated into a single mass so vast that no real name could be invented for it. To most who referred to it at all, it was just the mass. Suran watched the sky again as the day grew swiftly darker. His scheme had failed as it became clear that it was too late. Rayon Vame was the most sophisticated machine mankind had ever invented, capable of providing a complete artificial environment, of shifting a planet as easily as a spacecraft. It could never be used for its original purpose. All it could do now was help Tanat to avert the inevitable collision for a few extra days. It hardly functioned as a city now, for most of its citizens had departed when they realized Suran's scheme had failed. They had hoped to reach their homeworlds before they were swallowed by their suns, which would, in turn, be swallowed by larger suns before the mass swallowed the whole. Suran had remained, for Tanat was his world now. He loved it, and the one who loved Suran stayed with him. The process had been gradual at first. A few thousand years ago it had scarcely been noticeable. 1,000 years ago it had become plain what was happening. 100 years ago, half the suns and planets in the galaxy had been absorbed by the mass, and now the suns and planets of the rim were moving towards each other. A few more days, thought Suron, and we shall be on that last inward journey. And in less than a year, if the scientists' theories were correct, the mass would collapse under the weight of its own gravitation, and the entropic process would begin again. New stars, new planets, a new cycle. Would the cycle repeat itself? Suron wondered. Was the galaxy programmed to form and reform for eternity? Would mankind be reborn and recreate its history for perhaps the millionth time? From the top of the tallest tower, his pale body exposed to the elements he savored, Suron watched the waters. They had already reached some of the more distant structures. Again he looked at the moon, which now dominated the sky. It was a little closer than it had been yesterday, just as Tanit was a little closer to her sun, just as the stars gathered into a slightly tighter grouping. Not long, he thought. The short night passed. The sky's color changed from deep blue to violet to a pale green, and the clouds raced away over the horizon and were gone. The sun loomed over the horizon, and Suron instantly felt its heat. There was a whisper of sound behind Suron. So it was all for nothing. Mizrin Bur-Sen placed a gentle hand on Suron's arm. The sun is closer, Suron. Suron turned and smiled at his husband. I dreamed last night of mankind. What was all for nothing? Mizrin walked to the balustrade. Like Suron's, his skin was transparent and revealed the veins and organs of his hermaphroditic body. His pale hair waved in the warm wind. All the strife and the misery and the death, all the efforts of those who aspired to help mankind attain the tranquility and security which we gained so recently, all wasted, Suron. Mankind has been cheated. At the moment of its triumph over its condition, over mortality, over its environment, nature still plays her jokes, still manages to find a way to destroy us. Suron smiled. A somewhat anthropomorphic view of the universe, is it not enough to know that mankind did eventually triumph, did attain what the ancients called a state of grace? Is not the affection which you and I have something of a reward for all these millennia of struggle? Mizrin bowed his head. Perhaps. The tower trembled. The sky darkened as new clouds came sweeping over the horizon. The roar of the sea drowned the sound of the wind. Suron put the tip of one long finger on the balustrade and drew a sign. The bite of the wind and the bellowing of the sea were shut out as a field of energy formed an invisible dome over the tower. In the new silence, Suron and Mizrin stared into each other's large eyes. But our children are dead, said Mizrin at length. Each had borne the other's child simultaneously, some 50 years earlier. Both children had remained on the planet where they had been born, and both now had been consumed. Suron had accepted this fact without bitterness, but Mizrin, whose temperament was complementary to Suron's, still grieved. And that was why Suron comforted his husband now. Wordlessly he expressed his sympathy, and wordlessly Mizrin communicated his gratitude. The tower shook again. "What was your dream of mankind?" Mizrin asked. "I do not remember the images, merely the mood. I stood here and I dreamed, and then I awakened, and, Mizrin, I was happy." "You have shared that with me. I wish that I could have such a dream, but my dreams, when they come, are all of conflict and disaster." Suran pointed to the mountains. After my dream, I thought I saw something moving on the slopes yonder. Perhaps it was part of the dream. I think so. We are the last two to remain on Tanit, and there are no beasts here. Our ancestors saw to that. And yet I had an impulse to go to the mountains, to see. It is too dangerous, Suran. All the city's energy is being used to resist the pull of our sun and to keep our moon from falling into us. If you left its environs, it could not protect you. I know. Suran took Mizrin's hand and whispered a sound. They were transported into the heart of the tower, to a room of soft, ever-changing light which beamed nourishment into their systems. Then they made sweet, tender love, scarcely touching each other as they moved about the room in a graceful ballet of emotion. And the tower trembled once more, and the light flickered for an instant before resuming its transformations. Mizrin paused in his dance, and Suran saw that there were the traces of a forgotten emotion beginning to emerge on his face. The emotion was fear. We must accept this, Mizrin, he said. We named this city Inevitable Hope because it was inevitable that we should hope. But now that hope is lost. We must accept it. I cannot, Mizrin murmured. Suran, I cannot. Suran crossed the room and embraced him. Put yourself into sleep, he suggested. Cut off the objective world entirely. It might heal you. I have not done that since childhood. But do it now, Mizrin. Sleep helped our ancestors in this way when they could not tolerate the implications of reality. That was why they slept. I will try. Suran traced a particular sign on the wall of light, and the air in the center of the room shivered and whispered, and a couch appeared. Mizrin went to the couch and lay down, staring up at Suran. Close your eyes, Suran said, and Mizrin closed them. I will come and wake you, Suran promised. And Suran returned to the top of the tower, blinking in the intense light. He caused the dome to darken so that he could peer out at the landscape. The snow had melted on the mountains. The sea moved moodily around the lower towers. The monstrous sun marched across the sky. Suran focused his eyes so that the mountain slope seemed to come closer. Carefully he inspected each yellow rock, each deep black shadow and fissure, but only the shadows moved as the sun sailed steadily on. But then, as Suran shifted his gaze to the upper slopes, he saw a shadow which moved in the opposite direction and then disappeared behind one of the large fangs of rock which a recent earth tremor had split from the main body of the mountain. There was, after all, a living creature out there. A man? Suran was sure that no man could survive in the heat unless he had protective clothing. A visitor, then, from one of the inner worlds? Impossible. No spaceship could survive the immense gravitational forces which now existed in space, and there was no matter receiver still operating on Tanit Tuurtak. Suran wondered if the creature had come from a nearby galaxy. He reached a decision. Still staring at the slope, he waited patiently for the evening. It was now completely dark on Tanit, but when the sun had reached the farther horizon and the moon had begun to heave its monstrous bulk over the tops of the mountains, and the sky turned to deep blue, and the stars once again made their appearance, Suran left Rion Vame, city machine of inevitable hope. On his naked back he wore a light force field pack which would protect him against the elements and propel him over the rocks. Drifting a few inches above the ground, he flew against the wind as clouds thickened and obscured the sky, bringing the first snow of the evening. Suron increased his body temperature to counter the cold, and when the snowflakes fell on his naked shoulders, they melted immediately. Behind him, the city had changed color. It was now a peculiar shade of orange. Suron knew that its resources were almost exhausted. The sea covered more of the towers, and those towers which remained had begun to sway and to shake again. Suron reached the foothills of the mountains and began to ascend. The sky turned to a rich purple, and the wind slashed the clouds so that the moon could be seen again. It was even closer. Suron almost felt he could reach up and touch it. It dominated the landscape. Peering ahead, he thought he saw the moving shadow near the summit of the mountain. He increased his speed. He reached the summit. The wind was so strong now that he was forced to use more power in order to stop himself being hurled from his position. The moon seemed to threaten to crush him, seemed to fill the entire sky. An anthropoid quadruped emerged from behind a rock just below him. It was clinging to the slope, its hairy body rimed with snow, its fur flattened by the wind. It looked at him from its intelligent eyes, and Suron recognized it. He gasped. The anthropoid moved its head and stared at him warily. It opened its mouth and spoke, but the wind's yell swamped the words. Suron moved down the slope towards the creature. The alien retreated and disappeared. Suron saw that the rock hid a fissure in the slope, a cave. Light came. The cave was artificial. It was a room, possibly one of a series of rooms, and its contents had largely been smashed or thrown about by the tremors. On its 4 legs, the creature stalked across the room, skirting the litter, and seated itself upon an oddly shaped chair. Gravely, it regarded Suron. "I thought your species extinct," Suron said. Then he frowned. "Do you understand my tongue?" The reply was clear, firm, musical. "I understand it. My species was extinguished. It was destroyed by your species a long time ago." "I did not know that," said Suron. "There was vegetation and beauty. There was peace. Ages ago, your folk came with fire and burned all the beauty away, killed all my race save me. I hid far underground. Then your folk went away. I could never discover why they destroyed our world." "How came you to learn our language?" "A traveler." The creature gestured with one of its hands, and Suron saw a skull. It was the skull of a pre-hermaphroditic man. It must have been centuries old. "You killed him?" "He died. We were friends, I think." "Did he not know why your planet was burned?" "He spoke of a war. He said this world had probably been a potential tactical position, something of that sort. He said that if they had known of us, they might not have burned the planet, but they assumed that creatures which walk on 4 legs are not intelligent, whatever that had to do with it. My ancestors once made distinctions between beings who reasoned like them and beings of a less questioning disposition. Those who were content were destroyed. It has been put thus, but you survived all these years." "Yes, in order to die, it seems, with those who robbed me of my happiness. Is this catastrophe another of your actions?" "I do not think so. I am called Suron Rael Jiriek." "I am Molay Koishkari. Then what has caused this?" Suron explained. The anthropoidal creature seemed amused. "So none win. What happened to us now happens to you. With one difference, there will be none to remember mankind when it is gone. It is all it deserved." The cavern shuddered. "I suppose it is." "You are not like my friend." Malai indicated the skull. "You are calmer. You look different." Our race had begun to evolve into an altogether dissimilar species. As you are, we were almost immortal. We had no conflict amongst ourselves, no enemies to threaten us. We spent our time in adapting to what you see before you. We would have changed further, but... Suran paused. "And we had learned the habit of love," he said. "We had forgotten the habit of hate." "I have not yet learned to hate," said Malai, "and now it is too late." "I am sorry." "You think it good to hate?" "I think it good to know all feelings." Suran's gaze was drawn back to the skull. Malai brushed melted snow from his fur. His expression was contemplative. "There used to be music," he said. "I have heard no music for so long." "Perhaps you will hear it again?" "What do you mean?" "Some think that the galaxy undergoes a perpetual cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, that its history is repeated over and over again with only minor differences." "But that means I will know the pain again. Your words bring no comfort, Suran Rael Jurayek." Suran sighed. "I admit that the conception is also terrifying." "You seem unmoved by what is about to happen." "It is inevitable, Malai Koshkari." The cavern tilted. In spite of his force field, Suran was hurled to the far wall. Objects slithered with him. The skull struck the wall and shattered. Malai tried to save himself but was flung down and lay just below Suran, shouting in pain, trying to rise. Rock fell from the ceiling. There was a mighty roaring everywhere as the cavern continued to shake. Then it was still. Suran lowered himself to the angle of floor and wall where Malai lay. There was misery in the alien's eyes. Some of his bones were evidently broken. "That was the worst," Malai murmured. "What caused it, I wonder?" "The moon has fallen, at last, some distance from us, I would think." "What does that mean?" "It means that in a short while your planet will be drawn into its sun almost at the same moment that the sun joins other stars. We are all moving towards the center, Malai. A few hours after we are dead, there will be a single mass comprising what was once our galaxy. After that, it is believed, the mass will explode and the galaxy will begin again." "Death comes quickly," gasped the alien. "But life takes such a long time to form." "Will you come with me to Rian-Vamay, my city?" Suran asked. "There is the means, there, to ease your pain." "I am dying," said Malai. "Let me die alone." "Very well." Suran sought the entrance to the cave, but it had been blocked when the moon had fallen. He went back to the dying alien. "I am trapped, it appears." Malai raised himself on his elbow and pointed to a doorway. "There are several other exits. One of them may still not be blocked." "Thank you." "Goodbye, Suran Rael Jurayek." "Goodbye." Suran knew that the power was beginning to fail in his pack. He drifted through the dark doorway and widened his eyes so that he could see into the murk of the next room. There were pictures here and artifacts of all kinds. He realized that Malai had used the cave system as a museum, a monument to his slain race. Suran experienced what he thought might be guilt. He made his way through several similar chambers, pausing only to stare at a very ancient relief which seemed to indicate that Malai's people had once had indigenous enemies. It was a scene of warfare. The ape creatures were triumphantly driving away some kind of similarly armed Epicene people. and then he saw a rent in the roof, and light was coming through. Suron increased the power and moved up to the ceiling, passing through the crack and out onto the surface of the planet. He gasped as the light struck his eyes, and he covered them with his hands. He knew that there was little power left in his pack, but he increased the strength of the field still further and shut out the burning heat and the light as much as he could. He looked down the mountain and away to the sea. The sea was boiling. Clouds of steam swirled around what was left of Rion Vamay. Huge black fissures split the mountain. As fast as he dared, he began to descend. The screen around his body faltered. Suron knew he would die if it failed altogether, die more painfully and much quicker than ever his ancestors with their thicker skins would have died. He drifted over a new-formed crevasse, and even as he moved, the far side began to lean away as it grew wider and wider. A monstrous roaring filled his ears. The whole planet shook. With a sense of increasing panic, he at last reached the far side. One of the towers fell, and then another swayed and toppled. Suron knew that the machine had failed at last. The sky grew still brighter, and it seemed that the heat would blister his skin. The surface of the distant sea was now bubbling, and he could hear the hiss of its waters as they were turned to vapor. Again the screen faltered, and Suron's feet brushed the burning rocks. The tallest tower still stood, but it was some distance away. He saw one of the great power bands which had girdled the planet bend and then snap, as a steel wire might snap when cut. The several sections were flung high into the air, vibrating and twisting and then collapsing. Another tower fell into the boiling sea. Suron felt faint. His vision became misty. He knew he would die very soon, before he could get back to the room where Mizran lay asleep. There was chaos all about him, a terrifying confusion of flying rock and whirling steam. He could no longer see Rion Vamay. Perhaps the city of inevitable hope had disappeared completely. The sun grew even larger. Suron cried out in pain. Then, still drifting, he fainted. "Suron!" It was a little cooler. He opened his eyes and looked into those of Mizran Bursen. His were anxious eyes. "Suron, you live." "Yes, I live, but I should be dead." "I awoke and looked for you. I knew you had gone, then, to the mountain. I took a boat and searched for you, finding you senseless. I brought you back to our tower." "It still stands, then?" "It will stand for only a little longer. I have diverted all the remaining power to it." "I thought you asleep, my husband." "Something woke me. The moon falling, I suppose, or a sense of your danger. Perhaps both. I dreamed deep dreams, Suron, of mankind." "And they troubled you?" Suron rose from the couch and tried to stand on the swaying floor. The walls no longer shifted with a variety of colors. They were a pale green. "They comforted me, Suron. It is better to die, loving mankind than hating it." Suron nodded. "Malai will be dead by now." "Malai?" "I met a creature in the mountain, Mizran, the last indigenous inhabitant of Tanit Turtak. Our ancestors destroyed his race with fire. They destroyed all the vegetation on the planet. He survived for centuries, and yet he never knew hatred, only distress and puzzlement. He did not know why we killed his people." Did you know?" "I know only that mankind killed many such races as it spread through the galaxy." "And now you hate mankind?" "No, but I understand his bewilderment. For now mankind is destroyed. We are probably the last still living, and soon we shall be dead. But we are destroyed by unthinking nature. And was not that the force which slew the people of this planet? We slew them. Yes, but perhaps we only think we think. We use our thoughts to justify actions which we should perform nonetheless. Mizran nodded. He moved to one of the two couches and lay down upon it. It is true that we conquered nothing, he said, and now we are conquered. We conquered ourselves, and having achieved that, we now die. You think that was the purpose of our existence? I have never thought our existence had a purpose, and yet our ancestors believed something of the sort, that we're born to learn to love, that having done so, we should be reunited with the universe. Mizran closed his eyes. Will you let in some of the light, Suran, so that we may see this world once more? Suran touched the wall and drew a sign. The outer wall became opaque and then transparent, and the blinding light flew into the room. Heat came with it, but this time they welcomed it. Suran took his place on his couch and lay down. He reached out and touched Mizran's hand. And now we sleep, he said. And in love they slept. Then Suran and Mizran dreamed of mankind. They dreamed of all it had striven to be, of all it had achieved, of all its failures, and it was a dream of love. They dreamed of the stars and the planets of their galaxy, and of those who had left the planet Earth so many millennia before, who had explored and destroyed and brutalized themselves because they thought that knowledge brought love and tranquility, and it seemed that they dreamed the whole history of the galaxy from its birth to its death, that they witnessed the formation of each star and each planet, that they lived the life of each individual creature which had come into existence on those planets, and in their dreams they came to realize that time was a meaningless idea, just as death meant nothing and identity meant little. And as they dreamed, the last tower burned, and Tanit Tur-Tak fell into the roaring heart of its sun. Then this sun joined Cadel's star, and 100 other suns rushed together to form a single fiery globe. It was the last fire which momentarily burned in the darkness. Then it, too, fell into the mass. And there was only blackness where a galaxy had been. But already something was starting to happen to the mass as it began to implode under its own vast weight. Perhaps Suran and Mizran, or something which had been them, continued to dream, at least until the moment when cracks of light began to reappear, and the galaxy began to be reborn, as Suran and Mizran, an eternity later, might also be reborn. For time meant nothing, and death meant nothing, and identity meant only a little. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.